Thanks
Yeah.
for coming to the inaugural episode.
No, it's great. I'm sorry for being late.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah, I was late, like the coffee machine, like everything broke, like the coffee machine, and then like my setup.
Yeah, yeah. And the meeting software I was trying to use broke on me. Like it kept on saying there was no moderator, and I was like, no, but I am the moderator, and I'm here. I don't understand.
Yeah, we were all waiting for the moderator.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. How's stack packing going?
Yeah, things have been going great. We're like, yeah, I kept saying this for 3 weeks in a row. We're almost done with the migration.
Well, what's the
Yeah.
migration though? It's like a big rewrite, right? Of a
Yes,
chunk of it.
we rewrote the entire backend. It took a month,
Nice.
um,
That's not a
which
whole
was
month at the end of the like for an entire
yeah,
backend. That's not bad.
yeah. That was the original timeline, but now it's running up like into 6 weeks.
Even still, that's like I mean I would say usually I multiply by three, so a month estimate would be a whole quarter if you multiply
Yeah,
by
I'm
three.
always multiplied by two.
So you're
Yeah,
still under budget so far, under time budget.
yes. Yeah, I said it would be done in a month, but then expected it to be done in 2 months. But I think your estimates are more accurate. Yeah, things are running.
And I assume you took copious notes for this whole experience.
Yes, I took some notes, but like I didn't think you'd be able to read them.
Was it
Yeah,
so? Do
because
you
my
do handwritten notes mostly?
yes, so mostly handwritten notes, but then whenever I have some free time, I just write them down, depending on the notes. Like if they're like design drawings, I just like import it as a PDF. If it's just me thinking on paper, which is what I mostly do, I usually like do it by hand. And I got this really cool gadget
All right.
because I can have stacks and stacks of notebooks, and I can't find anything anymore. Yeah, it's super hard. So I read about this. It's called the Remarkable. It's amazing. It's amazing. I don't know like if you ever like watched videos on this thing. It's like they call it smart paper. It's an e-ink tablet, but it's for writing more than reading. Yeah, it's been incredible. Like you connect it to Wi-Fi to get some internet connection to synchronize like your document, like your notes, or like add books or move articles to Remarkable. There's a desktop app and a mobile app as well, but it works mostly offline. So like when you're thinking about something, highlighting like reading a book or something, you're completely offline, so there are no distractions. And I
All
thought this is
right.
great. Yeah.
So all right. So it's like it's a tablet, but has like a stylus, and you basically just treat it like a paper
Yes.
notebook.
Yes, exactly. It's e-ink, so like you get
Yeah.
the battery stays with you for 2 weeks or 3 weeks.
All right. That's pretty
And they
good.
did something really clever. It's a very niche product. Like they did something really clever. The surface of the tablet itself and the tip of the pen, like the friction, it almost feels like you're writing with a pencil on paper because
All
of like the
right.
friction and the sound. I don't know like if you can like let me try. I don't know how good my microphone is, but like let's try this. I don't know if you'll hear it.
Oh, that sounds like writing like with a pen on a piece of paper for sure.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
All right, so they had some like product person there that's just like, no, we have to make this feel like actual paper, even though it's just a piece of technology.
Yeah, it actually came like with a bit of a downside. So like if it like generating this friction requires you like to have this like nib that like erodes like or like friction makes it
Oh,
smaller
really?
over time. Yeah,
So
so
it's
you have to
actually
replace
like
the
a
nib.
pencil.
Yes, so you have to replace the nibs. I think it takes 6 or 7 weeks per nib.
Okay.
So this is terrible because like yeah, it doesn't just like work forever. You have to change the tip,
Yeah.
but like to make it more like paper like they like yeah they ended up designing it this way.
All right, and is this like a printer ink scenario where the nibs cost like four times the actual product?
No. No, it is I actually know like because like I just got this 2 months ago, and it comes with 6 nibs, so it's like get you covered for like 2 years. So I've never got to order one yet.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, all right. So, note taking.
Hmm.
I so in preparation for discussing note taking, I ended up redesigning my entire note taking setup because I was like, because like it's sort of like organically formed to some degree. Like I'd read something, be like I'm gonna do that, and then I'd read something else and do
Hmm.
that, and then so it's sort of a mix of things, and then in I was like, all right, I'm gonna like go back and read some proper stuff to sort of like formulate what is note taking, why I do it, and I was like, no, all right, I think I actually need
Mm.
to redo my setup because it doesn't make sense anymore now that like I'm actually like forced to think about it and process what I'm doing here. So this like last week has just been me like reorganizing
Mm.
all of the forms of note taking I do, and hopefully it's actually much better now. It's a little bit more structured, but
Mm.
so it's been like a good experience, an accidental good experience.
Mm. Yeah, I've been also trying things. So like I started using this method a couple like I've tried a couple of things, but they're always really complicated. So I tried using something simpler, and then this time I ended up with using this like method called this building a second brain by Tiago Forte.
Mm-hmm.
They have this like Tiago has this course online and like articles on this, but this time I decided to read the book
Yep.
for the podcast, so I get all the details and like the stories behind this, and it's pretty interesting, um, because like I feel like Tiago is talking exactly about like the lazy person I am when it comes to taking
Okay.
notes. So yeah, that's why I think yeah, it works great for me. Should we start recording this anyway? Because I think we're ready. Like
I've already started recording.
yeah, that's also.
But all right, so but before like, all
Mm.
right, so why do you take notes?
Yeah. So when I first started this, it's mostly because I forget everything. So like I'm a bit of a knowledge junkie. I like reading a lot of things, watching documentaries,
Mm-hmm.
watching YouTube videos a lot, and I forget everything. So I just decided like I want to remember more stuff. Um,
Do you actually go
first,
back and
the
read
first,
them?
um, not everything I write. So you never know what you would need to remember and when you would need to remember it. So
Yeah.
you don't know. So the first attempt was me trying to like before taking notes, I was trying to like find more efficient ways to remember everything myself without writing it down. And like, have you watched like the Sherlock series incarnation, the one from the BBC, the British Sherlock?
No, no, I haven't even heard of it. What is it?
Yeah,
I'm
so
sorry, I'm sorry. Yeah,
the
Sherlock.
series with Benedict Cumberbatch. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I saw like the first seasons or something like that. But what particular part are you thinking of?
Yeah, so they did something really cool. So Sherlock uses this method, it's called the method of loci, and Sherlock calls it like his mind palace.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
his mind palace is like this mental construct where you're arranging memories in a specific way in your brain. So like invoke other parts of your brain related to navigation because we most people are good at navigation. Yeah, I know people that like yeah get lost in their own homes, but like most people are good at navigation. Yeah, my partner gets lost a lot, so it's happening a lot with us. Um, yeah, and instead of just like that's that's why like emotional memories get to stick more because it invokes more parts of our brain. So if
Yep.
you invoke this part of like the navigation part of portion of your brain, you tend to remember stuff. It actually worked really well. Like back in college, I would like to practice this. I would memorize like decks of cards in the
Yep.
specific order and the suite. It worked really well, but it works for very simple stuff where you can come up with a mnemonic for it, but like doesn't work for generic information.
Right, right. Yeah, I've actually I've heard of Mind Palace before. I've never actually done it because I think um I've tried it a few times. Maybe I just never did it right, but I never felt like it actually that association actually worked very well for me. Like I would just end up
Mm.
forgetting the palace, and then I forget everything, and then I can't. It's kind of like there's some mnemonics where you know that thing where like if you remember your left or your right hand, you hold your fingers out, and the fingers when you put like your index finger facing up and
Yeah,
your
the physics
yeah,
kind of
and
like
it's like all right, well your left hand is the
exponentials.
one that makes an
Yeah.
L, and then so that's like a mnemonic to remember that. But then I can remember if it was I remember being young, and being like, wait, is the mnemonic that the one that doesn't make the L is the left one, or it's the one that does make the L? And it's like, what's the
Actually, get
actual?
me
So like these
yeah.
mnemonics always like fall apart for me because I'm always just like, what's the actual mnemonic again? What's the
Mm.
part I'm supposed to know?
Yeah, exactly. So like yeah, it helps to keep things in your brain, but you have to keep like iterating on them again and again to keep like the connections active. But like unless we have something external, like the lenses from Black Mirror, like the ones where you like
Yeah, you
record
record
everything,
everything.
remembers everything. Yeah, I think this is the holy grail of note taking. Like this is the best thing, because you're taking in everything, and then later on you're figuring out, okay, like what do I need, and then you sort of like look into how to retrieve these pieces of information again.
So for note taking for you, is it purely a remembering
Mm.
thing for you, or is it also a like a productivity tool? Like, is that part of why you do note
Mm.
taking?
Yes, because it's definitely about productivity more than remembering things. Because when I need to remember things, it's usually like, for example, you're working on a new piece of content, or like you're building something, you've built something very close to before, but you can't find it again, and then you have to start over. So you like, I think without note taking, you tend to start over again and again a lot, because we can't keep everything in our brains. At least for me. So whenever I have notes, for example, like when I was preparing a pitch deck for StakPak, I read a lot of DevOps reports and reports about developer productivity and pieces about developer productivity and developer experience. But then when you're trying to put together a pitch deck and you don't have like these like pieces of information at your fingertips, you have to go like on a Google search spiral trying to figure out like what you already know. But
Yeah.
because you didn't take down a note, you have to like trying to mine for these like gems again all over again. It's very time consuming.
Has your system sort of evolved over time naturally, or have you picked a system and that's what you go with?
Um, so I'm very lazy. So I always like read about a really system that I really like. It makes perfect sense. I pick it up and then like, yeah, I just abandoned it a couple of
Yeah.
weeks later. One of the thing like the systems I really like is like the, I think it's called the Zettelkasten system, or like a card box in German.
Hmm.
I think there was like a this very, I have it in a note some here somewhere. So see, notes are useful. Yeah, Zettelkasten. Yeah, it's where you arrange like note cards in a box, and then like you sequence them in a specific way. I don't remember the exact method, but it
Hmm.
involves four different kinds of notes. And I had a lot of hard time figuring out, whenever I read something or like listen to something on a podcast, where to fit it exactly, like in which note type to categorize this. And it's
Yeah.
super difficult. So like after a while, I just abandoned it because it required a lot of cognitive load when trying to organize my notes.
Yep.
Um, I picked up this building a second brain, and then after changing my laptop because I didn't sync it to the cloud, it was mainly offline. I lost all my notes.
Oh no.
And yeah, and I had to start over. But this time, like I subscribed to the Obsidian sync feature to avoid losing them again. Um, yeah, so
What
mostly.
is the system
Mm,
in Second Brain? I know there's like a few acronyms, right? Code
mm.
and para? Is that the other one?
Para, exactly. Yes. So the main one is para, where you're. This is how you organize stuff, and it's para stands for project areas, resources, and archive. So you have only like four directories where you fit things in, and in each of these directory you can create another directory, and then the notes fit with the second, like this the second layer. So you only have three levels. It's not very complicated. The projects is like our projects where you have a specific scope and a specific deadline, and this is something
Yeah.
we're working on now. So now, if I'm working on a feature that involves like building an agent for like DevOps deployments or something, I have a directory dedicated for that. And until this project is done, once it's over, you just move it to archive. So
Okay.
if it comes in so you never forget something. So in the future, it's like it's not cluttering your space, but at some point, if you're working on something similar and you want to revisit this, you can revisit it because everything is in the archive. Like so, all the projects you wrapped up, you can revisit to like scrap material, like recycle the material again from the archive directory. And then there is the areas directory where you get to keep ongoing activities. For example, I have an area for content because I want to work every day on like creating content and like doing
Yeah.
research for creating content. So this is an ongoing thing. It's not a project with a specific deadline. And you can have an area for like mental health. Yeah, for anything, like anything, any interests you have that like that don't have a specific deadline. But sometimes our interests change. So, for example, at some point, I really was into security. So, I used to work as a security engineer. So, I was really interested in reading about security, new vulnerabilities people found, new papers about like how to do static analysis and stuff like that. But
Mm-hmm.
now I'm more interested in developer experience and platform engineering. So if I had an area that's about security, you could just move it to the archive. So mainly it's about
Okay.
what you have active on your mind at this moment.
So is the P for projects and the A for areas is can an area is the work that you do in that go into a project or are these completely separate? Like if you're interested in developer experience and you're researching things, is the
Mm.
research for that now a project or is all
Yeah,
that work happening in the area?
no, it's all happening in the area because it's continuous. It never ends. Like this is something I'm mad about, so I just keep like reading about and like
Okay.
adding notes. Don't forget about it. Maybe at some point you would give a talk or like write a piece about like developer experience, and then you would start a project. Maybe move some of these materials to the project because you're working on it, and then you can like move it back or like move the whole thing to archive.
Yeah.
So like the idea is like you walk when you create a note, when you're collecting notes, all you have to do is visit, like, move through the first three directories, trying to place the node at the first directory, which is the P, the project. Is there an active project that's using this? And if the answer is yes, you put it in a project. And
Yep.
if the answer is no, then you go down to the areas. Is there any active area that this node would fit in? And if the answer is yes, you leave it in the node. If not, you'd move it to the resources section. The resources section is mainly like books, statistics, anything you think might be relevant in the future, but you're not sure. Like it doesn't fit within a project and it's not within an area. Like for example, the
Okay.
statistics about like how many tools developers use every day or something like that. Yeah, so it makes it easier to like put stuff somewhere without having to worry a lot about like organizing things. So like how I
Yeah.
do this is like I have a daily note and like I copied this from Obsidian. Obsidian gives you daily notes. And in this daily note, I just like write things I hear, write things I read about, and then maybe at the end of the week or like every couple of days, I just like try to take things in this daily notes and like reposit, like put them in a project or an area or as a resource. um, yeah, and that's basically it. So like it's very low maintenance when it comes to like collecting notes. You don't have to
Mm-hmm.
think about the connections, you don't have to think a lot about tagging, you don't have to think about anything. Just like place it in a folder and that's it.
Is there any structure to like here's how you should place your information in these so they're easily findable?
No, there are no instructions for placing it. So the idea is it makes it very easy to place things. You don't have to think a lot about it. So you place more things in there. There are some like they have like the code acronym for like how you collect or like capture information, and you have to focus on things that really resonate with you and really important. But
Yeah.
in this case, you don't have to worry about organizations and like finding things. When it comes to like when you're looking things up or like you're working on something and you want to look at these notes, if it's not in the right folder, then you can use search to just search through everything.
Yep.
And whenever you find something, you can like you tag and you think about indexing when you're actually like when you get the note and you're doing something with it. So for example, if I'm reprocessing a node, distilling the information in a specific node, then I can maybe add a couple of tags to make it easier. And one of the things I've been whoa.
What was that?
Yeah, balloon.
Oh, boy. That was terrifying. I was
Yeah.
like, where are you?
Whoa. Yeah. Yeah, it's yeah, really scary. Yeah. Okay, so if you're
All right, back on
looking,
topic.
yeah, back on topic. Yeah, the show has to go on.
But what's code that is
Mm.
capture, organize,
Distill and express. Yeah, I have it written down. I
don't
can't
express.
memorize
All
it.
right.
Yeah. So the capture part is like they say, Tiago says that you have to only keep only what resonates and what really matters. So for example, if you read about something, for example, like if you apply Terraform before merging a PR,
Mm.
and that's how you convince you should be doing it. And then you read about this like article where there's this mad person that says, okay, you should merge for before applying. This is something that resonates with you. You don't necessarily agree with it, but like
Mm-hmm.
including this as a note is beneficial for your future self because it's like it expands your thinking. Like, yeah, if you have an open mind, like it keeps your mind open to
Right.
new possibilities or areas where you're not like of how other people does this, and this allows you to be more creative in the future because yeah, I don't like I can define creativity well, but like most people define it as like you're basically recycling a lot of information
Mm-hmm.
and in a different way. So this is why it should resonate with you. So although you don't agree with this, it's somehow stretching the way you're thinking about things. So you should keep it, for example, compared to finding more and more people trying to apply Terraform before merging.
Okay. A topic close to my heart.
Yes. Yeah, I think the other one is organize. And Thiago mentions in organize, you just like solve for actionability. So place the note where you would need to use it and not just like somewhere. Because I used to, for example, like create directories about specific topics.
Yeah.
And so instead, Thiago argues it would actually be better if you place the note in a way that helps you use it in the future. That's why you get to place it in a specific project, because it's relevant to this specific project. For example,
Right.
you use the node in a specific project.
So the organizing is goes hand in hand with the para part because this is like where you're going to organize something into.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. That's why you organize things into projects and areas, because you want the information to be actionable, to be
Yeah.
useful somehow. Then you distill. Distilling is mainly like trying to summarize, trying to find the essence of the note you added to get like the crux of the idea. And this is also you doing your future self a favor, because yeah, I have like a lot of exported articles online as PDFs, and whenever I read the article, I love it, so I decide to save it in my
Mm-hmm.
archive. And then when I want to revisit this again, and then yeah, I'm too lazy to read like a 7,000 word article again.
Right.
So
So
after you
distill is
collect stuff,
basically like taking notes on this thing or in some way forming it in your own words, right?
yeah, we're trying to iteratively summarize the summaries. So I read an article, I just place it. You don't need to worry about this when you place the note, because you want it to be as smooth as possible, no friction when adding information. And
Mm-hmm.
then when you have some time and you want to rehash the article, you want to summarize it, like you check the highlights you've done before, and then you extract these highlights and try to summarize them further. And the more you revisit the note, the more you try to distill the information to make it easier. So if I visit the note a lot, then I need to, every time I visit the note, I try to make it shorter, or like trying to add a summary on top if I don't want to
Yeah.
lose information. Then when you visit it again, it's much easier to find, or like much easier to remember what it is about without actually reading the whole thing.
Yep. Yep. And then that was the D, right? What's the E?
The E is express, is like Tiago argues in the book, is that you like hoarding knowledge is not enough. You have to share it. You have to create
Okay.
content. You have to do something useful with it. And if you don't do that, you wouldn't get feedback on your ideas. So you just like keep accumulating knowledge and like opinions, and you're not getting any external feedback on what you're doing, and you're not actually sharing it with anyone.
That's kind of interesting that his system is really not only about the capturing of knowledge, but also that you have to have this social element too, which is different from any of the other things I looked at for this.
Yeah, it's interesting because like the main reason of this method is to do something with the notes, not actually the collection part. So it's not just about remembering, it's about doing something with what you remember.
Yeah.
That's where Tiago's trying to push people.
And is there a like a project management element to what's in Second Brain? Like here's how you actually work through organizing a project to be executed on, or is it really like put stuff in this directory and then from there it's up to you to figure out how to do the rest?
Tiago mentions in the book like he uses other task management tools, but for me, like I want to minimize the number of tools I'm trying to use. So just like add checkboxes on Obsidian, and then
Okay.
there's this tasks plugin where you can collect all the checkboxes in a like a single note. Um, I've just started using it. It's like all my previous attempts to use a task management solution to manage my tasks like have failed miserably. I tried Trello, I tried using ClickUp, I tried using a lot of things, and like I never commit to a single.
Yeah, yeah. So getting things done is obviously very much more about getting things done. So it's management of the tasks in front of you, but also a big part of that is um, keeping a reference of ideas around so you can reference them when you need to. So it really
Interesting.
makes a hard distinction between here's work that you're doing, here's things that have actions associated with them, And then there's this other place which is all your references, and he really goes into a lot of detail how to organize all those references, and like
Mm,
things like, oh, you should date everything you do because the date's going to be important once you like start forgetting, like, oh, was it around here, around there? Well, if you date something, and also with
mm,
dating things, you know how long it's been sitting around, and comparing it to like the second brain, getting things
mm,
done, it's really I forget all the what they're called, but it's like there's a capture step. You have to I think it's
mm.
capture, clarify, and like you have to think about it, and then
Mm.
you have to do it or something like that. But I forget
But
the actual.
when do you do this? Like when do you think about it, and when do you like when you're trying to like work with this method? Like when do you do these actions? Like do you think about it once you capture it, or like you think about it when you have some spare time after capturing it? Like you capture first, and then you decouple thinking from capturing.
He's really into decoupling things,
Mm,
so he has a whole workflow that describe. Maybe the whole system can be described in one this nice, easy workflow.
mm,
But essentially, you need and you need a system where no matter what you're doing, no matter where you are, if you have an idea, you can write it down somewhere, and
mm,
that where has to be a consistent place that you're going to go back to, because this is the capturing step. And then once you at certain points, whatever interval you need, like it could be every whenever you have 5 minutes, it could be at the beginning of the day or whatever, you have to go through what do you call it? It's basically like your inbox of all the stuff you've captured, and then for every item, if you can do it in around 2 minutes, 2 minutes is like the rule of thumb, but really depends on how much time you have. If you can do it in 2 minutes, just do it if it's an action. If or so, sorry, if it's actionable and you can do it in 2 minutes, just do it. If it's
mm,
actionable and you can't do it now, put it in like figure out what the next action is to make progress on that thing, and then make a to do item for it, or delegate it to somebody else, or he calls it a tickler file, which is like do something so you know there's something to be done, but you don't know what it is yet. So put
mm,
it someplace that's going to remind you to do it. And if
mm.
it's not actionable, it's is it trash? If it's trash, just throw it out immediately. If it's information, put it in your reference system. And if
Mm.
it's something to remind you of, put it in this tickler file. And but he's really much about like you need to be doing this. Like this has to be like how you just look at information all the time.
Mm.
So you're always capturing ideas. So his whole thing is you need to get everything out of your brain because there's these things called open loops, which are, for example, you think, oh, I need to buy my partner a present,
Mm.
and you've thought of it, but if you haven't put it someplace else, it's gonna keep on coming back. So let's say you're trying to like work on this refactoring, but you haven't actually gotten this I need to buy my partner a present out of your brain. You're gonna be doing
Mm.
something else, and it's gonna keep on like coming back in your brain every now and then. It's like a RAM refresh. It's like, hey, don't forget about that. Hey, don't forget about that. And his
Ah,
idea
okay.
is like your brain will stop doing that if it trusts you put it into a trusted place.
So the open loop is your brain keeping you reminding of like I didn't get this
Yeah.
part. Like so the open loop is your brain nagging you that there's something you should do,
Yes.
um, and making you anxious about it until you put it somewhere you know to remember it, so you stop nagging.
Exactly. Exactly. So get
Yeah.
all these ideas out of your head into a trusted system,
Mm.
and then you can actually focus on the things you want to focus on because your brain can sort of like relax because it knows
Mm.
it's not trying to remember all these things that you might forget.
Yeah, this happens a lot with me. Like I get very anxious when you have like a lot of things you're thinking about at the same time, but like once you
Yeah.
write them down, it feels yeah, it feels much better.
He says so he's a management consultant that has done he either does one-on-ones at companies or he'll like a manager will hire him to set him up, and he says one of the first exercises that they do, take all the stuff you're thinking about right now and just write it down, and he gives people however long they need for that, and then he's like, how do you feel? And I'm like, wow, I feel really good. And he's like, all you did was write stuff down. Like you didn't change
Mm.
anything or anything like that. You just wrote stuff down. And but that simple act just takes so much burden off your brain
Mm.
that you a lot of people he works with, at least how he claims in the book, just feel different after that. The other thing I like about getting things done is he has very simple operational definitions of things. So for example, what's a project? I
Mm.
think when we think about projects, we think about it's kind of this amorphous big thing we want to accomplish. And in getting things done, a project is any outcome that you want that has more than one step associated with it. So an example is like it could be as simple. A project could be, we have to like refactor this entire code base, or it
Mm,
could be that I need to buy a new TV. And so you might think, so the example like the TV one, you might think, oh, I just have to go buy a new TV. But he's like,
mm,
well, really, you probably actually have to research what TV you want to buy. Then you have to go compare stores to see which one has the price that you want to pay for it. And then the last step is actually buying it. So buying a TV
mm,
is actually a three-step project in this, and it could become more steps too. But really, it's
mm.
like it's either projects have no size associated with them. It's just more than one step.
Interesting. I like the part about like trying to break it down into steps. For example, like if I would have done it now, I would just like add a checklist item of like buy a TV. But then I think whenever I start working on it, I think, okay, then I discover there are multi steps involved. Like I have to research, I have to
Yeah.
compare stores, and then I get either get demotivated because the whole item is not checked off. So I just like postpone it or procrastinate or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what I would end up doing if I don't break it down. Yeah.
Another thing too is all the steps in your projects have to be physically altering the world in some way. Like it's not just like, and it could be thinking about something, but it's like
Mm,
actionable things that involve you doing something. So it can't just be like a noun. But I think yeah. So a lot of note taking for me is very
mm,
associated with how I want to accomplish things,
mm,
um, so at this point, like taking a note will be an action as part of a project. So I might
mm,
have like, all right, so if I'm go back to the TV example, I would probably have notes where I compare where
mm,
as I'm researching TVs, I'm like, all right, well now I understand TVs more, so I'm gonna write down like the attributes I'm actually have now learned that I need to care about, how to compare these things, and then I might take notes on like here's the actual prices I'm looking at, and then what the
mm.
general difference looks like, and then figure out the actual one I want.
Yeah, and I think actually it's very useful to take notes. Like you have this intermediary information, packets of information that might be useful in the future when you're working on something similar. Like for example, if a friend's asking in the future that they want to buy a new TV, then you can share with them some of the notes that would be
Yeah,
useful. Like the
exactly.
intermediary steps, like the actions you take to accomplish something or to build something, some of these steps can be recyclable in a sense in the future, whenever you're working on something else. And this is something I thought would save you a lot of time in the future. So like since I started StakPak, I learned, okay, I have to write more, and I my writing is terrible. But like most of like when I tried experimenting with content on LinkedIn, like people interact and like they engage a lot with content that adds something new, like that's actually genuinely useful to them.
Yeah,
And you come to this like very obvious realization that, okay, I realize that if there's something I read, it's actually insightful, like I feel it's useful to me, it will be useful to someone else, like at some
yeah.
time. So writing this down or like keeping a reference to things you learn as you go, because like as like a software engineer, you keep learning stuff all the time, keep reading about stuff all the time, even if you don't use it at work, it's just like interesting. And resharing the stuff you learn with other people, I think this is the best kind of content you can create. It's not directly related to what you're working on, but it's basically sharing stuff you learn as you go. And since I didn't used to take a lot of notes, most of the things in my mind, I don't know where I learned them from, where I read them, so I can't share this stuff with anyone else. It's really, yeah, it's yeah, it's really bad when you decide you want to create content, or like when you want to write stuff again.
As a founder of a company, do you think that note taking is a very personal activity, or is it something you can instill as part of the
Mm.
company and get it to be something just people do as part of the organization?
I think it's like it's super super helpful when building a company. Like there are a lot of things, for example, like whenever I read about, like last weekend I read a long article by um, there's this podcast about developer tools called Scaling Dev Tools,
Hmm.
and they wrote an article about interviewing 100 developer tool founders, and it's a 7,000 word piece. I read this over the weekend, highlighted it, distilled it, and then created like a very short summary, like a 100-word summary about the whole article, and then I shared it with the team over the weekend. And like everyone now on working with me on StakPak get the insights I got from reading this article without after reading it themselves. So like we have this knowledge sharing Slack channel and a couple like
Okay.
another channel called like
Do
DevOps
you
Gym,
hold
like,
on?
which are
Do you call this channel the Substack Pack?
Substack. That'd be a good one. We should. Yeah, so the StakPak channels, people like sharing stuff all the time, and usually I would just like drop in the link for the article, but like most of the people they don't end up learning it, reading the entire articles because it's just too long. So
Yeah.
if you take notes and then summarize these notes and share the summaries, people will read them more. So like no, everyone on the team is up to date with like everything you learned. You're just sharing it with everyone else, and this makes a lot of like a huge difference in a startup. Like everyone is aware of what's happening and not just like focused on the specific task they're working on.
Mm-hmm.
But like where I found like this most impactful is in product customer interviews. Like when interviewing customers, like over the past 2 years, I've interviewed like thousands of engineers, and most of this information I lost because I was not rigorous enough about like note taking.
Yep.
So let me tell you, like some of these notes I lost because I wrote them down on a using a pen on a paper, and then by the end of the day, I couldn't read my handwriting, so I couldn't dump them down. Yeah, so yeah, because I just like couldn't read what I wrote, so yeah, I just ended up throwing it away in a notebook. I couldn't like turn it like turn it into like digital
Yep.
um, form. Other of them, like I just summarize them and then dump them on like a Notion table. So like you have this structured data about things you learn from people you talk to, the insights, the pains, everything they share with you, their environment. And like the past couple of months, I've been trying video call transcription software, and it's a game changer. Like it blew my mind.
Yeah.
I tried it on this interview. The one I tried was Spinach AI. There are like tens of them. Like I couldn't try them all. But like when I use Spinach AI, like I had this customer interview. Like I was talking to like a tech lead about like how they do DevOps, how things work inside the company, and I configured it to use a template like for product interviews specifically, and I
Mm-hmm.
ended up with literal quotes, summaries, actionable insights, things are like they're wrong about our product, we should improve things, pains they have, and I compared this to the notes I used to take manually, and it's incredible. Like there's so much information, and when you're taking notes like with a pen and paper like or a pencil or something, like you don't have the time to code people literally and at the same time extracting summaries.
Yeah.
And if you have these like if you have 30-minute calls, like 10 or 20 30-minute calls over a week, you get like it's super hard to keep taking notes all this time and then to consolidate them and like turn them into digital format so it's searchable, you can share it with other people on the team. But like the AI note takers, is they're incredible because like they have the whole transcript, and it's a game changer for building products. Like if this was there like 2 years ago, we would have like at least 100 times more information that we have now at like our knowledge bank of customer
Mm-hmm.
interviews.
Yeah. Well, one thing I noticed too when taking notes on customer calls is you can either be engaged or take notes. I find it's really hard to take notes and also be paying attention to what they're saying as you're
Mm.
catching up on taking the notes on the previous thing they said. And I actually think it's really so if pre AI tools, it's actually worth it having one
Mm.
person in a call or a meeting whose whole responsibility is just to take notes and highlight things they think is interesting and like
Mm.
don't try to contribute to the conversation at all, but just recording it.
Yes, we've tried that. Like, have you read the Mom Test?
No?
It's a short, great book about like customer interviews, and this is one of the things they recommend among other things. So one of the techniques I picked up from this book, like I had to read it multiple times because it's very short, but it's super useful. One of the things, for example, is to make note taking easier. You can use like emojis. For example, like when I'm interviewing a customer and then there's something very painful or like they're expressing a pain, I write this as a sentence and then add a sad face emoji next to it. And then when you, for example, like they share something about their environment, you draw a tree next to
Mm-hmm.
this sentence. It makes it easier to take notes as you're going through this. And then when I dump the transcript on Notion or something, I use emojis to
Yeah.
sort them as well. It makes this easier, but they have a lot of great tips about like customer interviews, like and how to perform. So basically, the idea of the title, the mom test, is like how you would interview your mom about your product without your mom complimenting you and yeah, and saying that you're doing the best thing in the world. Yeah. So if you can get your mom using these techniques to tell you the honest truth, like the real
Yeah, you can get
thing about
anyone
the
to do
product
it
you're building,
then.
yeah, then you can do it with everyone else.
I like that. But for the Substack Pack channel,
Mm.
that sounds like a lot of the E encode express. Do you
Mm.
think there's a culture at StakPak of just taking notes, or again, or is the capturing part kind of a personal aspect of it?
Um, some people on the team they do journal a lot, like on the personal side of things, but at
Mm-hmm.
work, I didn't know that, but like I found out like an increasing amount of like a lot of developers take notes, and a lot of
Yeah.
developers have like a notebook on the side writing stuff all over the place. Like the way I think like it's not organized, it's not like very rigorous, but everyone takes notes, especially like developers I meet. I didn't know that, like, because it's something that's very present. Like most developers I know, they don't share that they take notes until like you're working next to them on the same desk, and you
Right.
like you realize, okay, everyone is taking notes. But I think the thing that's missing is actually sharing these notes. Like I don't know a lot of people sharing these notes, and it's definitely like something I'm trying to work on at SciPi. Like people should share more notes about what they're doing and the tasks they're working on.
Yeah.
And this is super useful because, like, for us, in our case, we start by bootstrapping, like building small products and using them to provide like DevOps or like platform engineering as a service. And you realize that you did a lot of things manually. And if you documented the details or like took notes of what you've been doing, this would have been very useful in an AI era when you're trying to build an agent or like automate a workflow. And this information is actually super useful in trying to make this thing smart enough to do this kind of thing on its own. So yeah, I think also one of the mistakes I made on the Substack channel is I used to express like share things as they come in. So like I found an article, it's cool, I read it, I like it, I share the link, and that's it. And
Right.
then expect people to read everything you post. And especially over the weekends, I post like 10 different links on the
Yeah,
Substack
your
channel.
employees are like, George, you gotta get a life, man. Come on now.
Yeah. And people like they don't just read everything. So what I'm trying now is adding like the distill part
Yeah.
of the code mnemonic is to actually distill the knowledge, summarize it, and share the summary with people. Then it's more useful to them
Yeah.
than just
Yeah.
sharing the link. Yeah.
I find that for me, a lot of note taking I do, well, one of it is write only. Like the act of writing it has
Mm.
reinforced what I find interesting in my brain. And I might go back to those notes periodically, but for the most part, the act of like just reading it's easier to just read something or hear something, listen to something, and it just goes in one ear and out the other, right? Like,
Yes.
but the act of writing it engages you more, and then for
Mm.
me solidifies those memories a lot. And so I find note taking to be really a real personal activity. So if I was gonna share things, I would probably have to have another step where I take those notes and then
Mm.
try to like do the distill step of like, but for public consumption and not for just my consumption.
Yeah, I figured like this happens a lot with me. Like I listen to books on Audible a lot, and if I'm not taking notes, I just forget everything once the book is over.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I think for me too, a big reason I do note taking is to crystallize ideas in my head. So at Terra Team, we've been looking at open sourcing a big chunk of our product, and
Mm.
my co-founder and I were going back and forth a lot about how to do it. And I found at one point I just wasn't actually productively engaging in the conversation because I was getting like very
Mm.
reactive. Like we were disagreeing about certain parts, and I was just reacting to what he would say rather than really like understanding what it was and how it fit into how I wanted to do things. So one weekend I just sat down and spent the whole weekend, like not nonstop, but taking notes on, all right, if we open source, here's my thoughts on open source, here's what I think we want to get out of it, all these things. And by distilling all those ideas into notes, I didn't share them, but it let me
Mm.
come back to the conversation in a way where we could have a productive conversation instead of just going after each other's ideas. And that was like, I'll probably never read those notes again because they weren't really what that was meant for. It was really about me like sorting all that stuff in my brain, sifting through it, and then
Mm.
ordering it in some meaningful way.
Yeah, that's actually something that's very useful for like when you're taking notes about like the process and how you reach this specific decision.
Yeah,
Because then in the future, when you like realize, okay, you're living with this decision, and sometimes I find myself wanting to go back and see like, why did I pick this? Like, why did I start working on this? Because when you get lost in the details, specifically as a founder, you need to be able to like backtrack and think about the bigger picture again, like why you're here, why you're doing this, and why, for
right,
example, like if you decided to open source the project, you want to be able to go back when things get rough or like when you're uncertain about this and read the notes again to figure out, okay, I took this for a specific reason. Like I didn't do this haphazardly. I thought about it, I wrote down notes, and this is how I reached the specific decision.
right, right. We do have one form of, I wouldn't call it note taking, but public.
Mm.
We have like a company repository. So it's we're very inspired by Oxide's RFDs, request for discussion, and that is fairly unstructured, but a company-wide repository where if you have something you want to talk to the rest of the company about, it's the place where you distill those ideas.
Hmm. Interesting. I've never seen an Oxide RFP. Like, can you share one with me?
Yeah, yeah. So they actually go the extra mile of not all of them, but many of their RFDs are open to the public.
Hmm.
And there's no real structure to them, I would say. I mean, like there's a high level structure of like here's the topic, here's the
Hmm.
thoughts, here's the conclusion. But some of them are with detailed chapters, basically, and sections and headings, and some of them are just like a few paragraphs.
Hmm.
And so it really scales to any size idea as long as it's something that people should know. And so Oxide has down from why they chose certain technologies to their hiring process as an RFD.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll definitely check them out.
Yeah, and I find having again, I think a lot of note taking, the actual act of it is very personal. So I think having this, here's the one place where, however you want to think about it, it has to become a public thing is helpful
Hmm.
because people can sort of do whatever they want on their own space. But once they need to express an idea to others in a way that impacts others, now we have a
Hmm.
spot for it where this is where that thought happens.
Cool. So you have your own personal notes, and you have this like sort of public format, which is the like the Oxide like RFPs,
Yeah.
where you share stuff internally. Yeah, that's really nice. That's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's all it's in repositories, so there's a whole
Hmm.
history. It's not going to get
Do
lost
you
in
use
like a.
Git? You use Git like GitHub for that? Like, what are your note taking tools or like
All
how
right,
does
all
it?
right, all right. So now we're going to get to tech stack. All right.
Yeah.
All right. So well, actually, so let's enumerate a little bit the
Hmm.
technology choices. When I looked around, I saw so what you can just use Notepad, for example. If you just want to be
Hmm.
simple, I just need to record things. You use Notepad. Notion is pretty popular. I've used Notion a little bit. I find it. I don't really like it. I think it's too complicated. It's trying to like
Hmm.
do too much for me.
There are Notion consultants now. Like,
I know, like, uh,
yeah. Whenever I get down this rabbit hole, it's time consuming.
right. I think like simplicity is key, or it's really important.
Hmm.
Obsidian. You mentioned Obsidian, right?
Yes.
And then, so my personal favorite is called Org Mode, which is just an Emacs system.
Hmm. Interesting. Org mode
Yeah, it's been
with a
around for a
G.
really long time. Yeah, as in organize, so org
Hmm.
dash mode. All right, so my personal setup is, well, I have a few things. One, on my phone, I just use Google Notes and a checklist to capture ideas when I'm out and about. And
Hmm.
anything that comes to mind, I just put in there. And then I have certain points in the day or like when I have time where I go through that list and then bring it into my uh, into the rest of my system, which is the
Mm.
org mode system. And in that, I'm doing a mix of getting things done for the actual project management. And that's super simple. It's just I have a file called projects. And then I have every heading. So org has headings and subheadings. So it's hierarchical. So the
Mm.
file level heading is the project. And then inside that are all the to do items for that. And then I have like to do modes where I can say like this is waiting, this is queued, and this is next,
Mm.
or this is done, or like won't do something like that. So that's where all that happens. And then once a project's done, I can archive it off to another location. And then for references, so to dos never have. I used to do it where I took notes in the to do item,
Mm.
and I decided that that was conflating two things, and I really wanted them separate. So now to dos are just do the thing. And if it's taking a note, then that goes into my reference system, which is another file, which is, I use a system called Johnny Decimal. Have you heard of that one?
No.
It's really simple, but also challenging because part of it is tries to limit you to like 10 areas, and then inside those you can have like as many things as you want. But it's like, so I have like one area which is like I call them like active ventures. So like Terra Team is in there, this podcast is
Mm.
in there. And you can have at most 10 in there. And then the next
Mm.
one I have, I call I'm really into history, so I have a next one called history, and I broke it down into like world history, world events, politics, etc. Then each one of those can have as many elements as I want in there. It's hierarchical, but it's meant to be not very deep. It's not infinitely deep. You try to go at
Mm.
most like 3 layers on that. But every so it's called Johnny Decimal because every entry gets a dotted number associated with it.
Uh-huh.
So like anything in world events is going to be like 20 dot something.
Mm.
And then so if you have something frequent, you can always just go be like, all right, I want to go look at 22.0.1, for example.
Mm.
And for personal management, the decimal system is nice in that you can start associating numbers with certain things. But part of the value is if you have, we actually do this for managing all of the company documents at Terra Team. So now, like, we can say, oh, go look at document 10.2. And so you just have like an easy way to reference it that everyone can unambiguously find the exact document you're referring to. So the decimal system is kind of handy in that way.
Do you have 10 areas, or like do you just like use the ones like how do you manage there? Like how do you like design categories to fit these
Well,
things?
that's the really hard part. So part of the reason that they limit you, so it's actually like 100. So it's 10 areas, and then each area can have 10 sub components to it,
Mm.
and then each one of those can have as many as you want underneath. Ideally, like less than 100, but really you can go as high as you want. Um,
Mm.
and part of the reasoning is so 10 is just an arbitrary number, of course, but part of the idea is to sort of force you to like find the pattern in how you think and group things, and using an artificial constraint that sort of maps to a physical constraint to because like the original system is you would have like filing cabinets. You can only store so much stuff in a filing cabinet, right? But with
Mm.
digital things you can store as much as you want, which is great, but the problem is you get sprawl where just data is everywhere and it's impossible to find. So Johnny Decimal System is really focused on you're storing data because you want to find it. So let's find out ways that we can contain how the data is so that we can always find it.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's the hardest part about like notes is like the retrieval and like how you would index stuff so you can find it in the future. And I think
Yeah.
this is very challenging because it keeps changing because you never know how you refer to something in the future. For example, like if you in the future are not working on Terra Team anymore, you're working on something else, like where should it fit now? Like the stuff you added in your personal Terra Team
Right.
category. Yeah, and that made me think a lot about like how LLMs can help. Um, and I've been running experiments on retrieval for nodes.
Well, so what's your setup like? Are you doing a lot of physical note taking?
So it keeps changing. Did used to use a lot of physical note taking. Now I'm using like an e-ink tablet to write notes. And
Mm-hmm.
within the tablet, I use like the para method where I have all the like the projects, areas, resources, and archive, and Obsidian. So basically, just two things like the e-ink tablet and Obsidian, and use the Obsidian mobile app and the Obsidian app on like on my desktop as well, and synchronize them. And they
Yeah.
all have the same folder structure, like the four folders, and then like breaks them down to project areas, resources, and archives, and that's it. Most of the experimenting I've been doing is with like how you retrieve information, how you summarize. Like so, like two, like I think there are two difficult things about note taking. The one thing is organizing them, figuring out like how to arrange things,
Yeah.
and the second part is how to distill things or summarize things. And you need both of these to be able to find documents. I think this is the biggest challenge, is trying to retrieve stuff.
Yep.
So how would LLMs be able to help you that? One of the reasons I settled with Obsidian, like I tried, for some reason I was going to use OneNote because I had apps everywhere. It synchronizes everything. It's great,
Yeah.
but it was super laggy on like on my mobile app, and like on Android. So it wasn't the best experience ever. So I ended up using Obsidian, and one of the reasons I did that is because of the plugins, and I wanted to experiment with different ways you can use LLMs to integrate this. So there was this plugin called like Smart Connections, and this plugin basically like whenever you're on a specific note, it shows you relevant note based on like semantic similarities and re-ranking of the other documents.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of having to tag things, it would show you similar stuff without having to figure like to think about a tagging scheme. And this is one of the major things that like turned me off from Obsidian. Like Obsidian or Notion or like these kind of very smart, very capable tools, they try to push you into like using tags, using links, using references, and
Yeah.
things get super complicated. And I tend to obsess about like how to organize things and reorganize them and reorganize them again. And then I end up abandoning this. And how what I'm doing now is I'm not using links. I'm not using like any of the fancy stuff without needing it, and trying to use like this semantic search. There's also OmniSearch, a plugin at Obsidian. It does like keyword search, it does semantic search, and at the same time, it can search images with vision models. So
Oh,
how I
interesting.
set this up? Yeah, so how I set this up, I use like my e-ink tablet, Remarkable, and Obsidian, and that's it. And on my desktop setup, I run local language models using LM Studio and a local embedding model. And then I connect this with my Obsidian with a couple of plugins. I'm testing a lot of plugins at the moment. What the main criteria is, I could write offline. Like I want to be able to work with my laptop on my notes on summarizing stuff and writing things completely
Yeah.
offline without having to send this to an API. Because as you said, like it's very personal. At the same time, you should be able to work on this everywhere.
Yeah.
Um,
Agreed.
yeah. So what I'm doing now, I'm trying three different plugins. But to figure out the best one plugin you can use, you can create a persona for a specific chatbot and chat about a specific document, and it helps you summarize the document. Like you can turn like I can recycle a piece of note into a presentation, into action, like getting from a note actionable items I can use,
Mm-hmm.
or like a to-do checklist. Like so, for example, like I can take notes in a meeting and then ask the chatbot to turn this into a checklist of stuff I should get done, and then I copy this or like save it in another note, and I aggregate all the checklists. So I don't have a specific place where I manage my to-do list. So I have like check boxes all over Obsidian, but then I use a plugin to collect them in specific notes. So whenever
Mm-hmm.
I'm writing notes and I figure out there's something I should do, I just add it to the top as a like a checkbox, and you can just like look up where the checkboxes are, or like use this aggregated document to see all the checkboxes across your notes. Um, so yeah, that's one way of using LLMs to make like summarization or organization easier, is to chat with stuff. Another one is semantic search, figuring out like finding notes without tagging. So it's like a dynamic tagging system. So instead of
Yeah.
thinking ahead of how to add categories or tag things, you can just like search by meaning or like search by semantics later on. And this uses two models. Like I use an embedding model and use a chat model. The model I'm using for chat is like, or generation, is Nemo, the Mistral model. And the embedding model doesn't matter much. Like most of them are good, and they can run actually on CPU. Like you don't need a lot of RAM to run an embedding model,
Mm-hmm.
and it just indexes the older notes. So then when like I'm trying now a couple of plugins. I haven't settled on this, because like I'm not sure yet. Like all of these plugins are new. Like there's not a single plugin that can do everything. So the chat one is called BMO Chatbot. The search plugin, it's called like Smart Connections. It allows you to like write a query to search through nodes by semantics, and it also allows you to like chat with no, actually no, that was another one, the third one. So smart connections also allows you to list relevant documents. So for example, if I'm working, I was just working on a talk about like lambda functions, and I have notes scattered about like cost calculations for lambda, which is super complicated. I didn't want to go through this hell again. So what I did is like I opened this, and the plugin automatically detected that there are other notes that talk about something related to lambdas, for example, and it showed me this without tagging, having to tag
Mm.
them. So it basically does like a semantic search and just like ranks the relevance according to like the distance between the meaning of the document what I'm working on and the document that's somewhere else and like in my vault. The third plugin I'm using, it's called Copilot on Obsidian, and this one allows you to chat with all the nodes, not just a specific node. So you can have a Q&A over all your vault,
Okay.
and chat with all your documentation, which is super cool. It's very unreliable. The quality so far is terrible. So I'm using a fourth plugin called OmniSearch. OmniSearch is a very old plugin. Like you can search with keywords, and now it actually integrates with Olama, so you can
Mm-hmm.
search through images. So if you have an image, it will just like index this image, like use Lava as like a vision model to create like a natural language summary of what is inside the image, and as this is metadata. So when you're using OmniSearch to search, you can even search through images and PDFs
Okay,
and
so
not change
OmniSearch is
technology.
like a full text search, and the AI component is getting automatically getting text for things that don't have text already.
Yes, yes, and I take tons of screenshots, and this is
Yeah.
super helpful for the screenshots. I learned about this first from the Google Pixel. The Google Pixel has like this screenshot app, and the screenshot app basically like processes all your screenshots and creates this text summary of what's contained in the screenshot. So then you can search through the text.
Mm-hmm.
And OmniSearch has this feature that does the same thing on your desktop. So like you can search through images, screenshots, yeah, whatever you have there. And this is something you couldn't do before, um, because like yeah, you can search through images.
Yeah. What I like about the stuff you're describing is
Mhm.
you can still take notes just in like a really unsophisticated way, and then you get the sophistication added on top, as opposed to say, like to beat up on Notion again. Like they're really, I think, making note taking like their complication is coming at the note to the input level, which is the place I
Mm,
want the least amount of friction, and I want the most value on the output level. And I think
mm,
anything that makes taking notes more difficult is kind of like a non-starter for me. I want that simplicity. I want the offline mode. I want to just be able to
mm,
like do it in my favorite editor that's just set up how I want to do it, where I'm just comfortable going. And I don't want to be like context switching about like editors or software or anything like that. And I just want simplicity and friction free.
mm. Yeah, and I think most of the complexity that comes from like the organization side of things is because retrieval or like finding information was super difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But now that you have this kind of LLMs, you can like iteratively summarize stuff, like and rehash ideas. You can search by meanings, you can search by keywords with all the like retrieval methods, like indexing with PM25, for example. So by making the retrieval easier, you can actually write notes anywhere, and then you can find anything you're looking for without having to spend a lot of effort organizing things. So that's why like it got me back. Like I'm really interested in this. Like so far, I actually have a friend is called Ziad working on something called hyperspaces, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to capture like help people capture information and build this timeline of information you're capturing, and then you're able to search through these information like what did you eat, where did you go, like what were you thinking at some point in time. But like they're more taking it from a journaling perspective,
Mm-hmm.
but I think the idea can generalize to everything. Like coming back to the Black Mirror episode where you're capturing everything through a lens, listening, everything you're listening and seeing. But
Yeah.
then the sophisticated part of the technology is where you can actually get the relevant information from what you've already seen and like what you've already collected.
Yeah.
Um,
Both
so I'm still
finding the
waiting for
relevant
someone to
piece
build
and
this.
then
Yeah.
also distilling it, right?
Yes. So finding the relevant piece, distilling it, which makes it easier to be like recycled, reused, revisiting again.
Yeah.
And I'm still waiting for someone to build this. Like it will be incredible.
Well, I think one thing, so finding, I think for me, I personally still need to distill it because I
Mm,
think the value there is the actual act of activating my brain to consume and then output. Whereas if I
mm,
think if I read a distillation, it's gonna be not better than it's not gonna like activate that part of my brain that's
mm.
really comprehending what's going on.
Yeah, I also learn visually. Like I have to draw stuff. I have to write
Hmm.
things down to learn. But what happens is like after a while, I just forget it again. So like it's useful when you're working actively working on the thing to understand it, to learn about it for the first time. And like that's why like I have a lot of like white printer paper before buying a tablet to do this on. I had like stacks of white like paper to draw stuff to help me understand things and learn about things, but I end up forgetting them anyway after like if you're not actively thinking about them. So
Yeah.
yeah, at least that's the case for me. So I think yeah, it's definitely useful to summarize and try to distill information to understand it well, as long as you need it. But what happens a year later when you're not actively working on this again? Like, how would you be able to like refresh this knowledge again? Um, I think
Yeah.
that's the key for retrieval.
Hopefully your distillation is good enough to reactivate that part in your brain, right?
Yeah, and then hopefully you can find your distilled notes and that you can read your handwriting. This is very important.
Well,
Yeah,
so
this
the,
is
the
something.
the tablet that you use, does that do any sort of hand recognition to text for you, or does everything become a picture?
Yes, it does some OCR. Like you can convert text into like handwritten text into like actual text.
Can it
Um,
convert your handwritten text into actual text?
yes,
Because you
yeah, it
can't
can
even
make
read your
sense.
own, apparently.
Yes, yeah, yeah, it does that better than me. Yeah, so vision models got really, really good at this. So it does that better than me, but it's not foolproof. Like sometimes you just like screw up. So I have to proofread it and fix anything
Yeah.
it got
Which
wrong.
is probably actually a good exercise, right? The proofreading, re-engages what you just did.
Mm. Yeah, but none of the existing technology and note taking solves the issue I have with having bad handwriting. So I have to take some calligraphy lessons or something. Yeah.
Exactly. So, do you think your process is slowly solidifying into something that you think is going to be, or I should say, stabilizing into something, or are you still pretty actively changing
No, I'm
your
still actively
system?
experimenting. Like I keep changing things all the time, keep trying new stuff. Um, so I think that the main challenge I have is trying to commit to keep doing this for a while to see the
Yeah.
results. Because if you're starting out from scratch, like you don't see the value of being able to retrieve stuff because there's nothing to retrieve.
Right.
So what's but like there's a trend. The trend is simplifying, like using like fewer number of tools. Now I'm relying on only two tools, and to try and make collection easier. So I like what you said, like decoupling collection from organization makes things infinitely like orders of magnitude easier and
Yeah.
encourages you to collect more things, and having more like thinking time. I think this is very difficult, like because now things are very distracting. So having time where you can be offline, whether on a tablet or like working without a connection on Obsidian, helps you distill and think deeply about what you learn and what like information you collect. And this is something I'm trying to do. So like there are basically two trends, things I'm solidifying on. One is having a very simple setup where you have only like very few tools that you can use. And the second thing is being able to think deeply about these stuff offline without being connected and without being distracted, because it's like it's super difficult to try do some deep thinking like or sketching or like distilling notes if you get like Discord, Slack, LinkedIn notifications all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think so. One reason I think a lot of these books around note taking get really close to the self help side of things, and this is going to
Mm.
change your world, is because you need some motivation to continue doing it. Because it's definitely not, I'd say it's not easy, but once it becomes part of your program, it just becomes the natural thing that you do, even though it's
Mm.
not easier. But once, like, I think we do things that are even hard as long as they're just the way that you do something, right? Like as long as like your own personal culture of like when I have an idea, I write it down, even if that means stopping for a second and pulling out my phone and typing it in to the phone. But I think I mean, one thing I don't like about a lot of the salesy side of this is I think I found getting things done because I knew I wanted to do the thing, but I was looking for a
Mm.
system. And I think if you approach it the other way, where you think the system is how you become successful at remembering and organizing this information, you're kind of like doomed to failure, right? Like the system is going to fill a need that you have. It's not going to make the need just by reading about the system.
True. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes we think it's a shortcut to just like have a methodical way to succeed or like to feel better about what you're doing, but it's not that simple. Like life is not simple.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
At least by note taking, I'm less anxious about life. But that doesn't solve everything
Well,
automatically. Yeah.
you gotta close those open loops and write stuff down, right?
Yeah.
I think that's like a good place to stop. I don't have any
Yeah.
more thoughts on note taking. I think, at least not right now.
No, yeah, that was so much fun. I really enjoyed
Yeah.
it. Yeah,
And
and
well,
initially, like we just got talking, and it's just fun. Like the topic is very interesting.
yeah, yeah.
It didn't
What
didn't feel like a podcast. It's just like a cool chat.
exactly? Well, that's the hope. It's just meant to be
Yeah.
like pretty natural and enjoyable rather than one rule I have is it's not an interview show. It can't be an interview show. It has to be like two co-hosts just like talking about stuff they find interesting.
Yeah, and I actually took some notes. Like there are things I'm going to look up, like the oxide RFDs, the org mode, Johnny Decimal System. It's
Yeah,
very cool.
Johnny
Like
Decimal.
it's a
Yeah.
very funny name, yeah, Johnny Decimal.
Well, it's meant. I don't know what they call it at libraries there, but in the U.S. we have it's called the
Uh,
Dewey Decimal System,
yes,
which
yeah.
is Johnny Decimal is like a play on Dewey Decimal because I think unless you're really into libraries, the Dewey Decimal System is just like some random thing you sort of like use, but you don't really
Mm.
understand it's actually like a really thought out system that
It's,
corresponds to
it's
exactly
very
how things are
complicated. It's
found.
very thought out. It's complicated.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll
Okay.
talk to you online.
Yeah. Have a
All
nice
right.
day.
Have a good rest of your day. See ya.
Bye.